I want to tell you about the letter that arrived on a Thursday morning 18 years ago. Government envelope. Official seal. The kind of envelope that military wives learn to recognize from a distance and pray they never have to open. I opened it standing in my kitchen, still in my robe, coffee going cold on the counter. My son Daniel was 4 years old, asleep upstairs, unaware that the world was about to reorganize itself around an absence that would shape everything that came after. Missing in action, presumed dead. 5 words. And then, 14 months later, the official declaration. Killed in action. A ceremony, a folded flag, the precise, dignified machinery of a government acknowledging the loss of one of its own. I buried an empty casket, and I raised my son alone. Thomas Carter had been everything I believed a person could be. Steady, principled, the kind of man who meant what he said and said what he meant, and never made you wonder where you stood with him. We had met at 22, married at 24. Daniel arrived at 26, planned, wanted, celebrated. Thomas deployed when Daniel was 3. He called every week, voice memos when the calls weren't possible. A letter, handwritten, actual paper, that arrived 2 weeks before the notification. I still have that letter. I have read it so many times the paper has softened at the folds. In it, he wrote about coming home, about Daniel's 4th birthday, about the kitchen renovation we had been arguing about for 2 years, and how when he got back, he was going to let me choose whatever I wanted, because life was too short to argue about countertops. Life was too short. He had no idea how right he was. I built a life after Thomas. Not the life I had planned, not the life the two of us had sketched out on the back of a napkin at a diner on our 3rd date, the house, the children, the kitchen we would eventually agree on. A different life. Smaller in some ways, larger in others. Daniel grew up knowing his father through photographs and stories and the letter I read to him every year on his birthday until he was old enough to read it himself. He grew up proud of a man he had never really known, proud of his sacrifice, of his service, of the father who had loved him completely in the 3 years they had shared before everything changed. I dated occasionally over the years, nothing serious. Something in me, some quiet, stubborn part, had never fully accepted the folded flag as a conclusion. I told myself it was grief. It wasn't grief. It was instinct. An instinct, I would learn 18 years later, does not lie. Daniel was 22 when he found the photograph. He had been doing what young people do now, searching, online. The digital archaeology of a generation that has grown up with access to everything and the instinct to look. He had been searching for his father, not because he doubted the story, because he loved him. He wanted more than the photographs we had, more than the official record. He wanted the texture of a person, the online traces, the old social media, the digital footprint of a man who had existed before everything went dark. He found something he wasn't looking for, a photograph, posted 18 months ago. A veterans organization in a small town in Montana, a group photo, 12 men, a fundraiser for a local shelter, and in the back row, slightly out of focus, slightly turned away from the camera, a man with Thomas's jaw, Thomas's posture, Thomas's specific way of standing with his weight slightly to the left that I had teased him about for years. Daniel called me at 11:30 at night. "Mom," he said, "I need you to look at something." I looked at the photograph for a long time, a very long time. My hands were completely steady. That surprised me. I had always imagined, in the version of this moment that occasionally visited me in the years when grief was loudest, that I would shake, that my body would betray me before my mind caught up. Instead, I felt very still, very clear, very cold. "Where is this?" I asked Daniel. "Montana," he said. "The organization has a website. Mom, he's listed. There's a name." "What name?" A pause. "Thomas Webb," he said. "But Mom, look at him. Just look." I was looking. I had not stopped looking.
Thomas Webb. I said the name out loud in my empty kitchen at 11:40 at night. It sat in the air strangely. His first name, a different surname. The same jaw, the same posture, the same way of standing that I had spent 18 years not quite forgetting. Daniel had already found more. Not much. The man called Thomas Webb was careful about his digital presence, but enough. A Montana driver's license record, public, a property listing from 4 years ago, a brief mention in a local newspaper from 7 years back, a community event, a name in a list of volunteers. 7 years ago, which meant that wherever Thomas Webb had been for the 11 years before that, he had not been dead. He had never been dead. The folded flag on my shelf suddenly felt like the heaviest thing in the world. I did not sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen table until 4 in the morning with my laptop and Daniel's phone and the photograph that had cracked something open that I had spent 18 years carefully sealing shut. I felt grief, but not the grief I knew. A different kind. The grief of something you thought was finished turning out to be unfinished. The grief of 18 years of raising a son alone, of every birthday and school play and fever and heartbreak and milestone that Thomas had missed, suddenly sitting differently in my chest. Not because he had died, but because he might not have. Why? That was the question that arrived at 3 in the morning and did not leave. Not, is it him? I already knew, somewhere below reason, that it was him. Why? Why would a man fake his death, leave his wife, leave his 4-year-old son, build a new life under a different name in a state he had never mentioned? What happens to a person that makes them choose that? Daniel flew to Montana. I tried to talk him out of it, not because I didn't want answers, because I was afraid of what the answers would be. "Mom," he said at the airport, "he's my father. Whatever happened, I need to look at him." "I know," I said. "Do you want to come?" I thought about it for a long moment. "Not yet," I said. "Go first. Come back and tell me what you find, and then I'll decide." He nodded. He understood. Some things you need to approach alone before you can share them. Daniel was gone for 4 days. He called every night. Brief calls. "I'm okay. I'll tell you everything when I'm back." On the 4th night, he called at 10 p.m. "I found him," he said. 3 words. And in the silence that followed them, I heard everything Daniel couldn't yet say. "Is it him?" I asked. A very long pause. "Yes," he said. "Mom, it's him." I sat with the phone in my hand for a long time after we hung up. The house was quiet. The folded flag was on the shelf where it had always been. 18 years. Daniel had grown up. I had grown old enough to be someone entirely different from the woman who had opened that government envelope in her kitchen robe with her coffee going cold. And Thomas, wherever Thomas had been, whatever Thomas had become, had been alive for all of it. All of it. I flew to Montana 3 weeks later. Daniel met me at the airport. He looked different. Not older, exactly, but changed in the specific way that people change when they have learned something that rearranges their understanding of themselves. "He knows you're coming,"
Daniel said. Good, I said. Thomas lived in a small house at the edge of a town I had never heard of. A garden, a truck in the driveway, wind chimes on the porch that moved in a cold Montana breeze. A quiet life. A deliberately quiet life. He was standing on the porch when we pulled up. 18 years. He was older, gray at his temples, lines around his eyes that hadn't been there when he left. But his posture was the same. Weight slightly to the left. Always slightly to the left. We looked at each other across the distance of a front yard and 18 years and everything that lived between them. He didn't speak first. Neither did I. Daniel stood beside me and said nothing. Emily, Thomas said finally. Just my name. The way my mother had once said it, just the name, nothing attached. Except this time, there was everything attached. Everything. He told us everything. It took 3 hours. I will not share the details here. They belong to Thomas and to Daniel, and to the specific private history of a family that was broken and is still, even now, deciding what it might become. What I will tell you is this. He had not left because he didn't love us. What had happened to him, what the war had done, what he had seen, what he had become in the months before the declaration, was something that had broken him in ways he had not known how to bring home. He had believed, in the specific, irrational logic of a man in crisis, that we were better without him. That his disappearance was a gift. It wasn't, I said. I know, he said. I know that now. Daniel grew up without a father, I said. I know. I buried an empty casket, I said. He closed his eyes. I know, he said. And this time the word carried the full weight of 18 years of knowing and choosing and living with what that choice had cost. I did not forgive him that afternoon. Forgiveness is not something that happens in an afternoon. It is something that happens slowly, in small increments, over the kind of time that cannot be rushed. What I did that afternoon was something different. I let him see Daniel, really see him, the 22-year-old man who had grown up with a photograph and a letter and a folded flag, and the kind of quiet, steady pride that children develop when they have decided to honor someone they have lost. Thomas looked at his son for a long time. Then he said, I'm sorry. I am so deeply sorry. And Daniel, my son, who had flown to Montana alone and found his father and carried the weight of that discovery for 3 weeks before I arrived, said, I know, but I need time. I know, Thomas said. I'll wait. You're good at that, Daniel said. It was not a kind thing to say, but it was an honest one, and honesty, I had decided somewhere over the Montana landscape on the flight in, was the only currency worth spending now. We flew home together, Daniel and I. The flag is still on my shelf. I haven't decided what to do with it yet. Some things need more time than 3 weeks and 1 afternoon to resolve. But I sleep differently now. The quiet, stubborn part of me that had never fully accepted the folded flag as a conclusion has finally, after 18 years, been given something it can work with. Not an ending, a truth. And truth, however complicated, however late, however costly, is always better than the alternative. Always.